All right, thank you very much. My name is Laura Thomas, and I am the HR manager at Riken Elastomers Corporation. And Riken is one of the industries in the industrial park, in the second industrial park. Is anybody here familiar with the industries in the industrial park? Somewhat. Let me ask you all this. What do you want to do when you graduate high school? What are your plans? College? Good plan. Anybody not planning to go directly to college? Okay, what's your plan? Okay, and what type of work? Welding. So are you going to be working in manufacturing, do you think? Okay. A lot of manufacturing companies need welders. So that's very important. How many of you have jobs right now after school or on the weekend? 2 people? How many of you have ever had a job? Okay. So, in your jobs, either your present or previous jobs, have you ever had a conflict at work? No? Never had a conflict? Never worked with anybody who was in conflict with another employee or the supervisor? You guys are lucky. You're lucky. What about conflict within your family? Maybe a brother or sister? Yeah, parent? Yes, okay. Sports team? Conflict is a part of everyday life, so we need to learn how to manage conflict. It can be both positive and negative. And normally we think of conflict as something negative, don't we? But it can also be positive, and we're going to talk about that today. What we're going to be doing is I will have a PowerPoint presentation, and I also have some video clips. And so I'm going to show you some of both. If you have a question and it's during the video clip, if you could just hold that question until we finish with that particular clip, then we'll address your questions, okay? All right. What classes have you had so far from outside instructors? Have you had communication? What else? That's all? What about, have other industry people come and shared with you? Okay, what classes?
What was the last week?
Other people?
Yeah, what was
Yes, the topics.
The last topic was welding college, welding school.
No, that was Tulsa. That was another speaker. We're talking about people from Hopkinsville, Kentucky coming in to speak. Resumes.
Resumes, good.
Workplace etiquette, right?
Good.
Personal, we got it.
Okay, thank you.
We noted disagreement. Communication between supervisors and subordinates would be perfectly understood. Coworkers would always try to help each other, and there would be no complaints from customers. In reality, however, conflicts are inevitable in the workplace. Conflicts can be costly for businesses and organizations. They can negatively impact a business and its employees, resulting in lack of motivation, reduction in productivity, and loss of skilled employees.
One of the issues that you have to consider is lost time, lost productivity, lost relationships, career damage. There's all kinds of possibilities like that.
Consequences of conflict in the workplace are work not getting done at maximum efficiency for the most part. It can also be stressful, which can cause health issues. You can have people with lost time when there's a lot of conflict. They don't want to come to work, or it makes them ill or uncomfortable to be at their workstation.
However, if handled properly, conflict can bring about new ideas, solutions, and perspectives in an organization. Conflict can be a powerful force for positive change. So, What is conflict? According to the Office of Quality Improvement and Office of Human Resource Development at University of Wisconsin-Madison, conflict refers to a disagreement through which parties involved perceive a threat to their needs, interests, or concerns. First, conflict is a disagreement. A conflict, whether it's real or perceived, is generated and escalates because of different opinions among parties involved. Once people in conflict realize their differences and try to understand each other, they can work together to solve the problem. A conflict also involves at least two parties. Conflicts among individuals are interpersonal conflicts. In the workplace, interpersonal conflicts often happen among coworkers, supervisors and subordinates, or customers and staff. An interpersonal conflict, for example, can arise when an employee perceives a colleague discriminates against him or her. Group conflicts are another type of conflict in the workplace. Group conflicts occur among two or more teams in the same organization, or among different organizations. For example, a group conflict can be caused by misunderstanding between an operations office and a customer services department. A conflict is caused by different perceptions. A situation can be interpreted differently by each individual. Therefore, individuals' perception of a disagreement may be different from the real disagreement. Lastly, a conflict arises because there is a threat to one's needs, interests, or concerns. This can be tangible, such as threats to one's position or income, or intangible, such as threats to one's power in the organization.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about what we just saw in that video clip. We'll start by talking about what the objectives for the class are today, and then we're going to talk about what conflict is. So, first objective is to define conflict, and conflict was defined in the video clip, and we'll go over it again in just a moment. We're also going to talk about how to analyze common causes of conflict. We'll compare 5 conflict management styles, and we'll learn how to resolve conflict. Additionally, we will explain a third-party intervention process. All right, what is conflict? Conflict is a disagreement through which parties involved perceive a threat to their needs, their interests, or their concerns. These are some common causes of conflict. Communication, miscommunication. Maybe we have differing personalities. We have differing values. There may be competition between individuals or teams. There may be a problem with wanting to control. So that's where power would come in. Also, trust. Trust is extremely important when you're working together. And then conflicting priorities. Okay, when we talk about what conflict is, it's important that we look at what happens as a result of conflict. And let's first talk about negative conflict. Some things that were mentioned in the video clip were absenteeism. Why is that important when we're in the workforce? If we have been in conflict with a coworker or maybe even our supervisor, how does absenteeism play into that?
How does it start the conflict, or how does it
Absenteeism may be a result of that. So how does absenteeism affect your job or the company?
Well, the company was just a worker that they lost. But on your part, that's just a job you lost.
Exactly. All right. So absenteeism is a result, a negative consequence. Also, lack of motivation. If we're not motivated, what happens? Not going to get the job done. Maybe we're not going to do as much. Maybe the quality is not going to be as good. That also leads us to lost productivity. If we're not motivated, then we're not likely not to produce as much. Maybe we don't get the work done at all. Stress is also something that can result from negative conflict. What happens if we have stress day after day after day? Pardon? That's right. So it can make us sick, can it? Sure. And when it makes us sick, then we're very likely to not be able to produce as much at work, or maybe we're absent. What about relationship to damage? Damage to relationships, rather. How could it damage relationships? Maybe if you have a conflict with a coworker and you don't get that conflict resolved, that may carry on to future interactions. Maybe if you have a conflict with your supervisor that doesn't get resolved. Which leads us to our next negative consequence, which is career damage. What's career damage? Any idea? Something happens to your career? Okay, for example, if you are someone who continuously is in conflict with a coworker or maybe your supervisor, then that's going to reflect negatively on you, isn't it? Which could cause you, an end result could be the loss of your job or maybe the loss of a future job. Any questions on that segment? Okay, let's talk about how conflict can be positive. Can anybody think of a way that conflict can be positive?
Constructive criticism.
Constructive criticism, yes. What about generating additional ideas? If we work in a team or we're in a workplace and there's never any differing ideas, then we become complacent. We don't continually improve our process and our work. So having those differing opinions can be very positive, can be very good for us and good for our workplace. They can also stimulate involvement in a discussion if you have a different idea. They can arouse creativity and imagination, and they can facilitate employee growth. If you're someone who has differing opinions and ideas, if you present those in a positive way, it can be very good for you as an employee and very good for your organization. And of course, they help us to move toward our goals. Okay, let's now look at the next segment.
What makes conflicts arise? There are numerous factors contributing to conflicts in the workplace.
Personality differences can cause conflict in the workplace. Perceptions can cause conflict. Perception of not being paid enough, not being paid fairly, not being treated fairly. Communication can cause conflict if everyone thinks they're on the same page and they're not, and we're into a project and we realize that we're doing different things to different purposes, and just style, which comes back to personality, I suppose. But some people tend to be abrupt, and some people tend to want to visit when they're presenting things or exploring ideas with coworkers.
Dr. Sandra Collins, Associate Teaching Professor of Management at University of Notre Dame, pointed out conflicts are rooted in three major groups of factors: situational factors, relationship factors, and personal factors. Situational factors refer to the physical environment to which individuals are exposed. Work-related stress is the most common situational factor which contributes to conflicts. In fact, according to the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, 40% of American employees felt stressed at work, and 29% of employees rated their job to be extremely stressful. Common contributors to work stress include the pressure of accomplishing more tasks in a shorter period of time, working in a highly competitive environment, or concerns over job security. Simply working in a poor physical environment, such as an office with loud noise or poor air circulation, can also cause serious work stress. Another situational factor causing conflict is diversity in the workplace. When diversity is mentioned, people are usually referring to race, ethnic, gender, or age differences. However, diversity is also determined by a broader set of characteristics, such as the person's class, religion, and an educational background. These individual differences can cause misunderstanding in the workplace. Relationships are built upon communication between individuals. People anticipate interactions with another person based on their experience of communication with this person in the past. This expectation will, in turn, influence the result of their future communication.
One of the issues that you have to consider is lost time, lost productivity, lost relationships, career damage. There's all kinds of possibilities like that.
Power is a major aspect of relationships which impact the process of conflict management. Power can be defined as the ability to perform an action or the possession of control or influence over others. Many conflicts are caused by issues of power. When people perceive others trying to gain power over them, it usually results in negative thoughts and actions. These reactions often lead to conflicts because neither party wants to lose power. Lack of trust is another crucial factor which causes conflicts. Trust refers to the belief in someone's ability and reliability. Conflicts are more likely to happen in a hostile working environment where a lack of trust exists. Ethical and honest behaviors are emphasized in the workplace because they help promote a trusting relationship among employees. More importantly, when conflicts occur, parties must be willing to share information with others in order to identify the problem. Without trust, parties will have a hard time believing the other parties will work for mutual interest rather than solely seek benefits for themselves. There are also numerous personal factors which cause conflicts. For example, personality clashes happen in the workplace all the time. Personality refers to a set of characteristics and qualities which distinguish an individual. While different personalities help team members see things from different perspectives, they can also create conflicts. A person with a literal personality is less likely to understand the point of view of a more creative coworker. In addition, different work styles can contribute to conflicts as well. For example, a direct communication style might be interpreted as rude and aggressive, while a relaxed management style might be interpreted as lacking professionalism.
Okay, let's talk about that segment. We mentioned some of these areas a little bit prior to the segment, common causes of conflict, but let's look at them a little more closely. When we talk about communication, it's one of the main causes of conflict. Why do you think that is? Pardon? Why else? Pardon? Tone. Very good. Yes. Could be the tone of voice that you use. Any other ideas? You know, it's important for us to know and to realize that we all come from different backgrounds. We have different experiences, and so different things going on in our lives. So how we communicate sometimes is a result of what's going on with us individually. So we may think we're communicating things properly, but the other person may not think so at all. An example that I want to share with you is a manager reassigned an employee's task to the employee's co-worker, but failed to communicate the reassignment to the employee. Is that going to cause conflict? Probably so. What about if you're working, and let's say you're working in industry and you're assigned to first shift, and your supervisor changes the schedule and assigns you to second shift, but forgets to tell you? Is that going to cause a conflict? Okay, very likely. So those kinds of things are real examples that may happen out in the workplace. What about differences in personalities? This is a little bit like the communication piece. We all come from different backgrounds, don't we? So what about different personalities? Do you two guys have the same personality? No. Okay. Could that cause a conflict? Maybe, maybe not. Again, depends on maybe your nonverbal clues or cues. It could depend on your tone of voice, what you're talking about at the time. So there are a lot of things that go into communication, and personality is certainly one of the things that could cause conflict with communication as well. We all have differing values, or many of us have differing values, and again, that comes from our backgrounds, how we communicate. So sometimes these can cause conflict as well. What about conflict between generations? Maybe communication with a parent or a grandparent. Anybody ever have a problem with that?
I definitely do.
You definitely do. Can you tell us about it?
Well, I mean, a conflict with my grandparents and my real parents.
Either.
Sometimes I don't want to do the chores that my parents want to do. It's conflict.
That's a pretty common conflict. Sometimes we have a conflict maybe with our parents or with our grandparents because we don't understand each other. Maybe what we think is important is not important to them, and maybe what they think is important is not important to us. So certainly generational differences can cause conflict as well. What about competition? Do any of you ever compete in any way? Sometimes competition can cause conflict, can it? Maybe between a sports team, or maybe competition for first place in some sort of contest. Maybe you're writing a speech or creating a project, and so competition there can sometimes cause conflict. The clip that we just saw talked about power. If we have a particular area that we're in charge of, maybe it could be something that you're doing at work and you're in charge of one particular task. If someone comes in and kind of gets in your territory, then that can be perceived as a threat to your power. Does that make sense? Okay, and that can sometimes cause conflict. Tell me how a lack of trust can cause conflict.
Well, some people could get angry if they're not being trusted by another person, but there's also got to be a reason why the trust isn't there.
And why do you think that trust might not be there.
Somebody told somebody or you just do.
Right. Yes, sir. Poor communication. Yes, absolutely. As we've said before, communication plays a very big part of conflict, doesn't it? Okay, and then the last, I think the last thing that was talked about in the clip was diversity. Diversity, very important. How can diversity cause conflict? Any ideas? Come on now. What is diversity? A difference? Yeah. There's diversity among all of us. So anytime there's a difference, often leads to conflict, doesn't it? Okay. Next, we're going to talk about the 5 conflict management styles. So everybody listen up.
On 2 dimensions, assertiveness and cooperativeness. A competitive style is high in assertiveness and low in cooperativeness. In this case, one party in conflict takes a firm stand to achieve his or her goals without seeking to cooperate with the other party or parties. A person who takes a competitive style will likely say things like, "This is your problem, not mine," or "I don't have time for you." An accommodating style is the opposite of the competitive style. It happens when a party is unassertive but highly cooperative. The party places great emphasis on cooperating and is willing to meet the needs of the other party at the expense of his or her own needs. For example, phrases such as, "Whatever you decide works for me," or "It's totally up to you," are usually used in an accommodating situation. An avoiding style scores low in both assertiveness and cooperativeness. People who choose this style simply refuse to deal with the conflict. They are indifferent to the outcome of the conflict, and oftentimes accept default decisions and evade controversial issues, saying, "I don't want to talk about it," or "It's not my business," are indicators a person is avoiding the problem. A compromising style is intermediate. People who prefer a compromising style try to split the difference to reach an agreement in the middle. Both parties are expected to give up something in order to gain what is most important to them. Parties who adopt a compromising style will have dialogues which could include, "If you can do this for me, I'll do that for you," or "I'm willing to sacrifice this if you will give up that." Finally, a collaborative style is considered to be the most effective resolution style in most conflicts. This style is highly assertive and highly cooperative. Unlike the compromising style, which suggests parties meet halfway and sacrifice some of their interests, the collaborative style encourages both parties work effectively to fully meet their goals. Saying things like, "I understand your situation," or "I can help you on this issue," will help parties work together toward a collaborative style.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about the 5 conflict management styles. A conflict management style is an individual's preferred way to respond to conflict. And as we saw in the video clip, there are 5 styles, conflict management styles. And this is according to, these styles were developed by Thomas and Kilman. The styles are avoidance, collaborative, competitive, compromising, and accommodating. So based on what you learned from that video clip, I'd like for us to talk about which one of those styles you think is your preferred way to respond. So if you're in a situation, how many think they would choose or do choose an avoiding style? One person? Okay, let's talk about avoiding. This is simply when you avoid the issue. Why might you avoid the issue?
Because other people's problems isn't really my biggest problem.
Okay, so you want to get along with everybody. You don't want to deal with conflict, right? Okay. This happens sometimes when maybe the conflict or what the discussion is not worth it. You know, maybe you're in a hurry, it's just not important. Also, if a person thinks that they have no chance of winning, then they may avoid the situation. Or if this is an emotionally charged situation, or if the two parties or groups need to just kind of back away and rethink about the situation and cool off. So that's avoiding. How about collaborating? Is anybody a collaborator? Okay, we're going to leave that one for last. How about competing? A couple of folks who are competing. This is seen by Thomas and Kilman as a win-lose approach, and let me tell you why. A person who uses this style is very assertive, and this is a very assertive way to reach your goals. They don't seek cooperation from the other party, and it may be reaching their goal may be at the expense of the other party. The approach may be appropriate for emergencies, when time is of the essence, or when you need quick, decisive action. Okay, now let's look at compromising. Who compromises? Compromiser. We have one compromiser. We often think of compromising as being the best way to handle things, don't we? But sometimes that's not always the case. And Thomas and Kilman say that compromising is a lose-lose situation, because neither party really achieves what they need or what they want. But we're often taught something different. We're often taught that compromising is important, and it is important. But what we need to try to do is collaborate rather than compromise, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. What about, have we talked about everything now except accommodating? Who's an accommodator? Anybody? What does it mean if you're an accommodator? According to the video clip we just watched, what does an accommodator do and what happens? Okay, let's talk about accommodating a little bit. Accommodating is when you cooperate to a very high degree, sometimes to your own detriment, where you give up what your goal is just to accommodate the other person. This approach is effective when the other party is the expert, maybe, or has a better solution. It can also be effective for preserving future relationships. Is that important, to preserve future relationships? Absolutely. It absolutely is important. So now let's go to collaborative. Did we say we had anybody who was a collaborator? What is a collaborator? Pardon? This is where we work together to reach both parties' goals. So this results in a win-win situation. This can be effective for complex scenarios where you need to find a novel solution. It can mean reframing or rewording your idea, rethinking about your idea. The downside to collaborating is that it requires a high degree of trust, and reaching a consensus can require a lot of time and effort to get everybody on board. So if you're in this situation and you're using a collaborative style, it requires a lot of trust. Any questions about the 5 styles? Okay. The next spot that we're going to look at is how to resolve conflict. And listen up. I want you all to listen very closely to this, because I'm going to ask you some questions afterward, and I want you to really listen closely and be able to give me the answers. So you probably need to take out a paper and pencil and jot down some things. Can we do that? You can write on this. You can pass those down. You can write on those as well. Did anybody not get a handout? Okay. Everybody ready?
Personal goals and final outcomes. Most people forget the process of conflict resolution is also the process of building a relationship. Building a relationship does not mean one should completely give up his or her interests to satisfy other parties. Through effective communication, conflicting parties will be able to accept the interests and values of others, as well as achieve their own personal goals. People with collaborative minds realize conflict is a mutual problem, which will be solved through discussion and negotiation instead of communicating in one direction. The collaborative attitude will set a good foundation for later instances in conflict resolution. An effective communicator is a person who can listen actively in a conflict situation. Good listening skills go beyond the ability to pay attention, maintain eye contact, and eliminate distractions.
Listening is a big issue. Going back to what we started with, and that is the different forms of communication. It's verbal and non-verbal. Most of it's non-verbal. But, mediators use, and people involved in conflict theory use words like fair as an example. Everybody has a different definition of what fair means. What does good mean? What does nice mean? What does pretty mean? Those are all words that have different meanings. And so when you're listening to somebody and they say, I like a beautiful picture, my picture of what beautiful means, it could be quite different than what yours is. So those active listening skills then get into things like reframing and parroting and asking for clarification to make sure we're all on the same page with regards to whatever language words we're using.
How can a person listen actively during a conflict? First, it is important to ask questions. Asking people to share their perceptions will set up the first step of communication. Examples of these open-ended probing questions include, what do you think about it? Or, how does it make you feel? Once a person starts sharing his or her perspective, listeners will want to ask clarifying questions to check whether they really understand the message. These questions can be, by saying that, you mean, or could you give me an example of what you mean? In addition, active listeners try to control emotions when the other party becomes emotional. It's natural for a person to feel angry or fearful in a conflict. Under such conditions, it's important the listener keep calm and acknowledge these feelings. Saying, I understand you're very upset right now, or I know how you feel, is a good way to let the other party know you're trying to be collaborative. An active listener also captures nonverbal cues. Much of our emotion is conveyed nonverbally, such as the pitch and volume of our voice, our gestures and postures, or our facial expressions. Careful observation tells the listeners the other person's true feelings through their nonverbal communication. Words have the power to shape our perceptions. While negative language focuses on the problems, positive language leads to solutions. In conflict resolution, one can use the reframing technique to create a constructive and positive viewpoint for the situation. Reframing in linguistics means to express something in a different way without changing the meaning. For example, you are not a team player can be changed to, I prefer to be informed of changes about our project. You missed your deadline again could become, is there any way I can help you work more efficiently? It is impossible to make any positive changes if what needs to be changed is unclear. Specific statements tell people what the problem is and how it can be improved. For example, A general statement such as, "This proposal is awful," does nothing but harm the relationship. Alternatively, "I think the proposal's financial statement needs more work," gives a suggestion on how to improve. Lastly, it is important to use relationship-building language during the conflict resolution process. People in conflicts are often concerned with losing the battle, which makes them distrusting and sometimes hostile to the other party. Conflicting parties can create a more comfortable and cooperative atmosphere by saying things like, "I'm sure we can find a solution for this issue." Such statements show the party cares about the relationship and focuses on both sides' interests. As a result, the other party will likely relax and react less defensively.
Okay. What is active listening? Pardon? Actually listening, and how does the person know that you're actually listening?
You give me full attention.
Okay, good. What is a collaborative attitude? Did you write anything down on collaborative attitude? Okay. Who can even guess what a collaborative attitude is?
Try and agree with somebody.
Pardon?
Try and agree with somebody.
Trying to agree, trying to get along, trying to find a resolution. Okay. What about positive language? Positive language. Did you write down any examples of that?
Solve the conflict.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you. Okay, didn't we see some examples of positive language in the clip? Who can give me an example of that?
How can I help you work more efficiently or something?
Pardon?
There's one though. How can I help you work more efficiently?
Working more efficiently? Okay. All right. We're going to do a little exercise now that's going to help us understand how positive language can help us with conflict. Okay? So I'm going to pass out a sheet, a positive language sheet for each of you, and I'd like for you to work in pairs. So just find a buddy, and the two of you work together to come up with answers to the situations here. Is rephrase the statements that are listed and make sure we use positive language skills such as reframing, specific statements, and relationship building language. This is going to be very important when you have a job and you're out in the workplace. How you frame things and how you phrase your communication is going to be extremely important. Very important with getting along with others. Do you guys have a partner? Okay, let's get busy. So the first one is, this proposal reads awful, especially the financial statement part. How would you rephrase that to make it more positive? I'm going to give you just a few minutes to work on that. This proposal reads awful, especially the financial statement part. So how could we reframe that or rephrase it so that it's more positive and not as offensive? Anybody? What about if we said, I think the proposal could use some more work. Could I help you with the proposal, or could I help you with a certain area of the proposal? Does that sound more like a more positive statement? What about number 2? You are rude and thoughtless. Is that something you would actually say to someone in the workplace? No. No. That's not something that we should say to someone in the workplace. How might we reframe that or rephrase it to sound more positive? Maybe we could ask that individual to communicate in a different style. Okay. What I'm going to do at this point, because of our time, is I'm going to ask you to take these home with you, or if you have a study period later, and finish them. Okay? And so we'll move on to our next slide, because it has something very important on there that I want to share with you about conflict in the workplace. Okay? All right. The video talked about third-party intervention, didn't it? It alluded to that just a little bit. And what they are talking about is a facilitator, a mediator, or an arbitrator. But often in the workplace, something that sort of is a first step before we go to third-party intervention, or is a part of third-party intervention, is something called an open door policy. And most organizations have an open door policy. And what that means is, if you have a problem or you have a conflict with someone, every manager or supervisor, maybe from supervisors all the way up to the president of the company normally, has their door open and willing to listen to what your issue is and to help get that issue resolved. So that's often the way we resolve things, especially in industry, is we have an open door policy. With an open door policy, we help to develop employee trust, because you know that there's somewhere that you can go to help get your conflict resolved. If you go, often we have what we call a chain of command. So you go to your direct supervisor, and if you still don't feel comfortable with the outcome, you can go up to the next step, which is his manager, and all the way up the chain of command. Of course, anytime you should be able to go to human resources and talk about what your issue is, if it's a conflict or some other problem that you're having. So open door policy is very important, and that's normally how we begin and try to solve problems such as conflict in the workplace. Okay. Last slide. An assignment. Don't you all have a journal? Do you journal? Is it part of your requirements? You don't have any requirement in this class to take anything away from what we've talked about. Pardon? A folder? Okay. I'd like for you to add something to your folder about what we've talked about today. I want you to think about conflict, and think about those 5 conflict styles, and I'd like for you to write an entry into your folder. Maybe it's something you learned about the 5 styles of conflict. Maybe it's something you learned about communication. Can we all do that? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, you can do that and turn it in. That'll be fine. I really appreciate you all inviting me here today to speak about conflict. It's a very important topic in the workplace as well as outside of the workplace. So the more skills that you all can develop before you get out into the world of work as far as dealing with conflict, the better off you will be. Thank you.